All right, so this is the HMIS training for shelters and transitional housing to properly enter data into HMIS when clients come into the shelter or transitional housing program, okay? All right. Let's see if I can get to the other. Do you guys see the PowerPoint or no?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. I think I finally, it only took me a year, figured out how to do that. All right. So in Service Point, which is our HMIS, someone needs to, oh no, I know what it is. Okay. It was me. In Service Point, we start always in Client Point. Okay. So when you are doing any data entry, the first thing you're doing is going into Client Point. All right. I do have access to the chat now. Okay. So the very first thing you're going to do when you go into HMIS after you log in is you're going to click on Enter Data As, and that's in the top right-hand corner, and I had just showed you that. You are going to select the program, HUD calls them projects, that you are currently working in. So if you work in multiple programs, then you want to make sure you're choosing the right one, okay? If you don't do this first, before anything else that you do, you're going to have to go back and delete everything and start over, okay? So I can't stress this enough that you always, always, always have to do Enter Data As first, okay? Then you choose the project that you're putting people in, and you click on the green plus sign to the left of the project name in order to select that project. And once you do that, then it will appear in that top right-hand corner under Enter Data As, okay? The next thing you would do is you're going to search for the client that you're attempting to put into your shelter. So when we do a search, you never just, first of all, you never just jump in and start adding a client into the shelter, because that client could exist in the HMIS system already, and you don't want to create a duplicate record for that same client. So what you'll do is you will have you already clicked on Client Point in the menu bar on the left, and you will type in the first couple of letters of their first and last name into the search. It's important that you're only doing a couple letters of the first and last name, because that allows for a typo, for the client to have kind of changed up their name a little bit. A lot of times we'll see John Smith might have told the street outreach worker that his name was Jonathan. And now he's telling you his name is John, and maybe he's going to tell someone tomorrow his name is Johnny. So if you just type in J-O and then S-M, you'll get all possible matches for that down below. But if you were to type in John Smith, you might not get the same guy, because maybe yesterday when he talked to someone, he said his name was Jonathan and they put in Jonathan. So it's important to put in just a few letters when you're doing the search. Once you type in those letters, you click on Search, which is in the right here on the left. If there is a match or any possible matches, they will appear down below. If that is the same client, and the way that you can verify that is by looking across the screen and you'll see the last 4 digits of the social security number and the client's date of birth, and whether or not the client is a male or a female. So you can use those to make your best guess if they are the same, that is the same person or not. All right, if it is the same person, then you're going to click on the pencil to the left of the client's name, and you're going to review the information in the client profile tab and update it as appropriate. So you want to change or update any answers just on the client profile, which is kind of like the face sheet for the client, to make sure that it's accurate for that moment in time, in that moment when you are talking to the client. If it is not the same client, or if there are no matches down below, then you'll click on Add New Client with this information. Okay, so we're going to go through this process as though we're adding a new client, so that you can see how to do it from start to finish. but you will see a lot of times that folks are already in there. Okay. Any questions so far? You can put in the chat too, because I do have, or unmute yourself, because I do have the chat up now. Okay. So this slide really just covers if the client was already in the system. You guys can see the PowerPoint? I just want to double check that.
Yes.
Okay. Because for some reason on my other screen it's not, but that's okay.
Okay, the answer for me is no. I'm only seeing the first screen.
Yeah, same here. I can't see
Service
the
point.
PowerPoint.
All right. Bear with me
Yeah, I
one
can't see the
second.
PowerPoint.
We're going to stop sharing altogether and we're going to start sharing again and we're going to choose the PowerPoint. I don't know why that happens, but now you should, okay, because my other screen couldn't see the PowerPoint either. So, all right, now you should all be seeing the PowerPoint. Yes?
No.
What are you seeing?
I'm seeing HMIS if client already exists in the system.
Yeah, that's the PowerPoint. Okay, good.
Oh, okay, I'm there.
Okay. All right. So one slide just to cover if the client already exists in the system. You will get this backdate pop-up window, which is this thing here that I'm circling around. You want to choose the correct date. In an ideal world, we would all be putting clients in HMIS in real time, and the ideal world does not exist. So by and large, we are putting folks in a day later, a few hours later, whatever it may be. So you want to make sure that you choose the date that the client actually came in, and the timestamp is always 12:00:00 a.m. Okay, so for anybody that missed it, that would be midnight. And the reason for that is to make sure that anything else you do on that day, the client's first day, is captured in the data. Okay, HMIS is time sensitive down to the second. So if it says here, right, the current system date is set to with a date and a timestamp. So that whatever I was doing this screenshot, that's what time it was. You never want to do current system date. You always want to do whatever the date is at 12 a.m. And that ensures that everything will be captured in the reports that we pull, with the exception of exiting the client. So when the client leaves, you want it to be a PM, right? Because you don't want it to end at 12 a.m. on that day. So other than exiting, everything should always have a timestamp of 12:00:00 a.m. And I do want to emphasize that that is actually important, okay? So you would set the backdate. And again, this is only if the client already exists in the system. You would run through the client profile screen. This is the client profile screen. And you would make sure everything is updated for each of the household members. And you find the other household members in the households tab. And then you would save everything and then you would go click on shelter point. So it's just updating the existing information for clients that are already in the system, okay? All right. But now we're going to talk about, let's say this is not someone that we have, this is someone brand new. So for some of you, for Catholic Charities folks, if you are getting someone out right from the Board of Social Services or from parole, you might have someone that's not in the system yet. If they're coming off the 211 list, they are already in the system. All right. But if they're coming referred from parole or the board, then they're not. They might not be in the system. All right, so then you would be adding the new client. And again, the backdate mode window pops up. So you set the date for the day the client came in at the 12 a.m. timestamp. The next thing that will appear if you're adding a new client is this window, okay? And again, this is only if there's no match already in the system. You're going to, if it's a single adult and nobody else is with the person, you're going to click Add Client Only, which is this box right here on the left. If it's a client with a partner or children or children, you're going to choose the center box, okay? And we never use this third box over here on the right, all right? So it's either the one person by themselves or someone in the middle, all right? So you would click either Add Client Only or Add Client and Add New Household. And then if it's only a single in the slide deck, you would skip to slide 10. We're going to do this as though you're adding more than one person because that's the harder way. So we want to make sure you know how to do the harder way, not the easier way. Okay. So after you have selected add a household with a child, or more than one person, it's going to take you to this household tab, and it's going to help you to create the household. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do in the top is you're going to choose the household type. It's a drop-down box. So what you'll find is it'll say female single parent, male single parent, a couple without children, and a variety of other household types. You will also see in there choices like individual male, individual female. Don't do that, because if you're doing an individual, you don't even need to do a household. So just ignore the household altogether. It won't even take you to the household tab if you said add this client only. If the only other choices in there would be like unknown or other, the only way other applies is if it is some other type of relationship or roommate situation, okay, that they're coming into the shelter together, and that almost never happens. So really just choose the relationship that best demonstrates the family structure, okay? It's in HMIS, and I'll say this probably 100 more times today, you never use other or unknown or data not collected, because in Middlesex County, we're very particular about data, and those answers don't actually tell us anything, okay? And we use the data to inform the way that we fund services. So we don't want to just put stuff in as other or data not collected. That means we need to explore a little bit more with the household and get better data, okay, get better information. We don't collect any data that we don't need. All right, so it is anything that we are asking the client for is an information that either HUD requires us to ask, or that will help inform our system to provide them with services and housing moving forward. So for families and couples, you've already selected the household type up on top. The next step is to type in, just like we did before, a few letters of the other family member's name, first and last, and do search. And if there's a match, it will appear down below. And if there's not, then you would click add new client. Okay, so you do that for each household member. Once you're in this household field, if the additional household member does not already exist, then it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to add this new client? And so you say yes. Okay. All right. Clients added to the household, once you've done all that, will appear at the bottom. So this is the sample household. All these individuals were added. And so everyone will appear. And then once you have everyone added, you're going to click on continue at the bottom. But you have to wait till everyone's in. Okay. The next screen that pops up after you clicked on continue is this household. You see that you've made it. This was a female single parent household. The income, don't even worry about that. You have all the household people, and you'll notice right here, you have their ages, which are blank in this sample because we haven't put their dates of birth in yet. And you have a column for head of household and a column for relationship to head of household. Those items have to be answered. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to select the head of household. So you'll choose whoever the head of household is in this sample, you're going to choose yes here. And that's going to automatically change the relationship to self, because self is the head of household. Everybody else would be no. You can only have one head of household, okay? And that's important. Whoever is the head of household, the relationship will automatically change to self, and the other ones you have to then identify. So you would choose from the drop-down menu a choice that like son, daughter, parent, spouse, or wife. There are two choices in that drop-down list that you may not use, or maybe three. One is other, like unless it's a roommate situation, but I think it actually says something about other non-related. So that's what you would choose. The other things you would not use is there are two kind of strange choices. One says husband and father, and the other one says wife and mother. You never use those. And the reason is that you cannot be both of those things in relationship to the head of household. So I hope that makes sense, meaning the female in this family is not the wife and the mother. Let's say it's Jane here. Jane is not the wife and the mother to Jack. That's just not possible in the state of New Jersey. So you will choose the appropriate relationship, okay, in that column. Once you've done that, you'll go up to the top and click Save. In the event that you wanted to see if anybody else was associated with this household or the head of household in the past, you can click this black arrow. And whenever there's a black arrow and it's pointing to the right, you can click it and it will point down and it will expand to see if there was anything there. Right now it says this household does not have any previous members, but it's possible that there would be something that would populate there if there was a family member as part of the household in the past. Okay, any questions on this section right here? You guys can just jump in or chat and I will pay attention to both. Okay, this is, that was the create the household. This here is just if it was a single adult, you would, you're not going to the household. If this is if we had clicked on add client only, you would go through and you would populate all of these fields, all right? Now, in order to do that, this is the client profile screen. Here, under client record and under client demographics, you can click on the pencil to the left of each of those, and that opens up a window where you can type in the information in those two sections. Race and gender, those are drop downs, but other things you would type in. All right, then you would continue down, and we'll go over this in the next couple of slides, and you would fill in all of the additional profile information as well. All right, but that was because you don't have to do the whole household thing. So this is how, though, you fill in for each household member. Even if we were in the prior screen and you were doing each family member, you know, then you would be filling all this in, okay? All right. Now we're back in the household tab, okay? So we see this particular household is a male single parent. You'll see here, head of household is marked as yes for John, and for Joseph, the head of household is marked as no. When you say yes, someone is the head of household, relationship is self, and then you had to choose for the second person, and so the second person is his son. And once you've done that and you had clicked save, you get to then look down below that, and then now you have to fill in for each household member all that additional profile information. All right, and that's what we're just looking at on the single adult as well. A couple things, and this is an old screen, but veteran status is up here along with the social security number. So obviously minor children are not veterans. You do want to make sure that's filled in. It is up here in the client record piece. So everything that you go through for this whole screen, questions that are bold with an asterisk, those are required data elements, meaning that you must fill those in, and the system won't actually let you continue if you don't. If something is in not bolded or is in italics, then it's either not required or it's not, it might be dependent on the question above it. Okay, so just because something's not required doesn't mean you shouldn't fill it in. If you have information, it might be important. A couple of other things about filling all of this in. You have to do it for each household member. So you'll see up here that this is highlighted in blue. That's the head of household. Once you get to the bottom and you've filled everything in and you click save, then you come back here, this will have a green check mark next to it. Then you click on the next person in that section and you'll get your window for that second person. And you fill all of that out, and once you've done that, then you click save at the bottom again, and both of these people will now have a green check mark next to their names. A few other things about this, about HMIS in general. You see next to the data element, you see a vertical colored bar, right? And this one here happens to be like a lime green. So if you were to click on this, it would show you the history of that data element, meaning all the different times that someone answered that question for a client, and it will probably show you the agency or the program that entered the information. It might not show you the actual staff person, but it'll show you also the time frame when that was answered. So let's say this was not a new person, this was an old person that had been in the system before. If you clicked on that, you would see that that data element was answered for that person 4 different times and over the last 2 years. And you won't normally see that with like a date of birth or a gender or a race, because those things tend not to change theoretically, but you would see it with some of the other questions that are more about where that person is in that moment in time, if that makes sense. So if your client is giving you an answer that's different than what's on the screen, you can look and see that 2 years ago, when the client said his date of birth was 1973, and now he's saying 1975, you can just double check that with him and say, okay, just checking, because a couple of years ago you were somewhere and you said this. So it's always a good way to kind of check in with the client. Okay. Any questions on any of that? All right. So as you're going through, this is, I'm just going to do a couple of items on the, oops. All right, I'm going to do a couple of items on the client profile screen. In additional profile information, this very first part, current contact information. When you see a little window like this that looks a little different than the rest of this, this is called a sub-assessment. That's what Service Point calls it. And you have an add button. So whenever a client moves location or changes their phone number, right? That's the big one. You want to add a new number here. Now, what you will probably see is that there's might already be a phone number there. If it is no longer the correct number, then you will give it an end date. Once you click on add, a pop-up window will appear, and you'll be able to add the new phone number, and the start date would be the date that you're putting it in. There will also, if there's a phone number there already, there will be one of these things, a pencil, right? There will be a list here of all the different dates that something was put in here. So you want to look at the last one. If the last one's wrong, you can click on the pencil to the left of it. It will appear in a list here. And you can put an end date next to it. And that means that's not where the client is anymore. That's not the client's phone number anymore. And that way you can put an end date on that one and then start a new one. And that way we always know, the whole system knows that this is the client's phone number at this point. So anytime you have I know they change their phone numbers every day, right? So anytime you have a client's phone number change, you definitely want to update that, because that way, if the client leaves the shelter, but maybe you did a coordinated assessment for the client and, oh gosh, we just found a housing opportunity for them, then the coordinated assessment staff can reach out to the client. All right, so it's important to always keep that information updated. The other time you definitely want to update the phone number there is when the client's leaving your shelter. Please make sure that the phone number listed there is accurate, okay, when they're leaving, because a lot of times folks might go from one shelter to another, or they might go from a shelter to the Board of Social Services for a hotel placement. It would be really good if coordinated assessment staff can reach out to that client if an opportunity comes up for them. So it's important that that phone number is always updated, okay? All right. In this client profile screen, and this question also appears in the entry, okay, but whatever you do on the client profile screen will populate in the entry screen as well. So you don't have to worry about doing an answer 5 times. Whatever you put in on any screen will populate on the other screens if it's the same question, all right? So after you did the client's contact information, excuse me, 1 second. All right, thank you. The plug came loose. Are you guys still there?
Yep, we're here.
So I can't even hear you right now because this other computer. Can you hear me? Someone type in the chat. I have no speaker on this computer.
Not as well.
I can hear you, but
My
not
other
as
computer
well.
died because I thought it was plugged in and it wasn't. 1 second.
All right, so I've started the recording back. Okay, so in the client profile screen is the after you do date of birth, gender, race, is the not relationship, is the prior residence. So where did the client where was the client staying before? So for the purposes of doing the entry, this basically is the equivalent of where did the client sleep last night. So it's not necessarily where did they live before. So it's really where were they yesterday before they came into your program. Okay, and that's really important. So that's an important distinction. So they might have been living in their own rental 2 months ago, and they got evicted, and then they were couch surfing with friends and family, and then they could no longer stay there, so they called 211 for assistance. So then the answer is not in their own rental, right? The answer would have been that they were staying with friends and family. Okay, so it's important that it's not, don't get thrown off by the question, the prior residence. It's basically where were they last night before they came to your program. All right, and that's really important. A couple of other things that we normally cover is when we talk about a client, it's not on this screen, but when we talk about a client's race, you'll see that there's primary race and secondary race. And secondary race is not in bold because not everyone is multiracial. So if someone is multiracial, then you would fill in the primary race that they identify and the secondary race. So what are their races? Ethnicity is separate from that. Ethnicity means Hispanic or not Hispanic for the purposes of this data collection. Then gender is, there are choices in gender to include, I think the choices include gender nonconforming, different transgender options, male, female, and there might be a couple of other options in there. So you choose the way in which the client identifies, okay? So does anybody have any questions on race or ethnicity or gender and how to fill those out? Okay. A couple of other things then with prior residence to make sure you're clear on what these definitions are. So the emergency, you'll notice in the dropdown that there are headings, and you don't really have to worry about what the headings are. It's not necessarily relevant to how you answer the questions, okay? Emergency shelter, you'll see at the top, place not meant for habitation, which is basically anywhere outside. You'll see emergency shelter, which would include a domestic violence shelter or any hotel paid for by an agency, including the Board of Social Services or a house of worship or any institution that's paying for a hotel would include the emergency shelter. Safe haven is not something that we have in Middlesex County, and it is not the same thing as a domestic violence shelter. So to be clear, a safe haven is not the domestic violence shelter. If they were at Women Aware or any other domestic violence shelter in the state, that would fall under emergency shelter. Safe haven is a HUD term, and there's actually only one safe haven in the state of New Jersey, and it's in Morris County. So that's never the right answer, basically. All right. Hotel paid for without emergency shelter voucher, meaning that they paid for it by themselves or a friend or a family member were helping them to pay for it. So if they said they were in the hotel, the clarifying question is, okay, were you paying on your own or was an agency or a church helping you to pay for it? Okay. Host home, it's another HUD term, usually referring to homeless youth, and it is not something that we're using here in Middlesex at this time, so you don't use that. That's not going to be your right answer. Rental with GPD tip assistance is also not something that we have in Middlesex County, so that's not the right answer. So there's a variety of rental options. You see them over here in the window on the left. Rental with HUD VASH. HUD VASH is a voucher for a veteran with a disability. So if the person coming to you is not a veteran, having served in the US military, that is not the type of voucher that they had for their apartment, okay? So if they say they had HUD VASH and that they are very clear about that, and you said no, that they're not a veteran, then you need to go back and have another conversation with them about whether or not they ever served in the US military. All right, so it's like checks and balances, right? Permanent housing other than RRH for formerly homeless persons. Now, what that means is that they were in a homeless dedicated housing environment, such as they had a voucher through the continuum of care. They were working with an agency like CCC Housing or UBHC, and they had a voucher or Edison Housing, and they were in one of those. Maybe they were at Kilmer Homes, and some of the apartments at Kilmer are set aside for homeless. So those are all places that they could have been living, having gone there through the homeless service system. So if a couple things, if they were in one of those situations, then they're already in HMIS. You're not adding them as a new client. If they were in one of those situations, they got to that housing situation through the homeless service system, meaning they already went through this whole process before, and now they're back for whatever reason. And that means they exist in HMIS already, okay? If you have questions about that, you ask your supervisor, or you can send an email to me or Cassandra or Christiana in my office. Rental with RRH or similar subsidy. So rapid rehousing, which you guys all know, Irene Shaw's office administers almost all of the rapid rehousing in our community, or TRA. So if they had or have TRA from the Board of Social Services, and that's where they were living, then that counts as rapid rehousing. Rental with HCV. HCV stands for Housing Choice Voucher, and that is what that means is Section 8. So they have Section 8, or they had Section 8, they were living in an apartment with Section 8, and now they're with you. Public housing, so any other public housing, and then rental with other ongoing subsidies. So any other subsidy that's not already covered in this list that we just went over, right? Everything else in this list is pretty self-explanatory. Transitional housing is literally, that's a place, okay? It's a program. It's not a transitional situation that they were living in. If they were couch surfing, staying with friends and family, there are choices for that. You see them here in the list. Those are the right choices if that was their situation. Transitional housing is a place they're coming to you from another program. In Middlesex County, there are only two. One is for homeless young men, and it's operated by Garden State Homes. And the other one is for ex-offenders, and it's operated by New Jersey Association on Corrections, and it's called the Sanford Bates House. So if they're coming from a transitional housing program in Middlesex County, it's one of those two things. And that's all it could be. They could be coming from a different county, and maybe there's still transitional housing, but that's it in Middlesex. Okay. Any questions about any of this list, definitions? This is important stuff, actually. Okay. You can either unmute yourself or you can type in the chat if you have questions. The other thing that's important to note is that all of these choices are the same choices that you have when someone leaves your program. So they are the choices that are listed under destination. So if someone is leaving your program and they're going to a specific homeless set-aside housing situation, then you're going to choose permanent housing. If they're getting rapid rehousing, but they're just using it for the security deposit, and they're going to live at Kilmer or another, if they get a referral for another permanent housing program through the coordinated assessment process, you're still choosing permanent housing. Like people go live at an Ingerman property or Kilmer, or they got a voucher, but it didn't help them with the security deposit assistance. You're still going to choose the permanent housing other than RRH, because they're really not getting that rapid rehousing assistance on an ongoing basis. They're only getting it for that security deposit. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. All right.
Bob, and I do have a question.
Okay.
If they get first month's rent and security deposit, is it RRH?
Not if they're going to a homeless set-aside program, for example, Kilmer, an Ingerman property. But if they're going into just scattered site, regular apartment, and they're getting any kind of rapid rehousing, but they don't have a voucher, then you're choosing the rapid rehousing one. But if they're getting, if they're
Okay.
going into, like if they got referred to Kilmer or they got referred for a voucher of some kind, then you're going to choose the correct voucher type program.
Okay, so if they're going to scattered site, whatever, and they're getting first month's rent and security deposit, you say RRH, but they're not getting the continuing 3 months, whatever it is. They're not getting anything further.
It's,
Okay.
that's still RH, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. So this was all still on the client profile screen. Ignore this piece up here. So at the bottom of the client profile screen is a spot to add an emergency contact. Highly recommend that you do that. You have an alternate or emergency contact here. Just like we talked about with the contact information, you can click add and put in the contact's name, phone number, etc., and the relationship. And at the bottom, there's a section for client notes. Here's the thing. Do not put like everyday client notes. That is not where that goes. But when you call and offer a client a spot in the shelter, you can put it here. And that way, this section is visible to the entire community. Our HMIS system, by and large, is open, meaning that a lot of the information is seen by other programs. And that's a good thing because that way we can help to coordinate a client's pathway and try to expedite their pathway through our system. But you wouldn't want to put your everyday progress notes here because that's like work product of your agency. And that's also giving the day-to-day blow by blow on the client's situation. And that's not necessarily necessary for the entire community to see. So this is just what you're going to see here is notes from 211, notes from my office from the coordinated assessment, from the screeners. And you can put a note here if you have called and left a message or made an offer of shelter to the client. Okay, so that's all that would go there. Also, just down here underneath that is a section for file attachments. This is where, please, you can attach the client's homeless history. So if you've done, I'm working on creating within HMIS a homeless history section, but I haven't gotten that done yet. So this is where you'll add the actual homeless history document. Just like you're putting an attachment on an email, you can add new file attachment here and include it with the, and attach it just like an email. When you click on that, you scan your computer, attach it like you would to an email, and then click save and it will be there. If you were to put any other files here, which is helpful for the clients, like ID, birth certificate, social security card, social security award letter, that's helpful for us to do that for the clients because those are the things they often lose or need help finding or retrieving. And if we have at least copies, if they were to resurface in our system, we can help them to obtain new documents if they've lost them. You would do that, but then you'll notice that there's like a lock. It will be green and open or red and closed on the right. So I would recommend that the homeless history stays unlocked because that way other agencies can view the homeless history, see where the client's been. It helps to tell the client's story. But the documents you would want to lock so that it's not, because that contains very private and identifying information. And so you want it there, but you want to lock it so that only you have access to it. Then if the client surfaces at another agency in the future, they can say, oh, but Catholic Charities took that information, they put it in the system. If you don't see it, you can either reach out to Catholic Charities to unlock it with the client's permission, or you can reach out to me because I'm the HMIS system administrator and I can unlock it for the client so that you can access it for the client in the future. So that's a good practice with our folks because they do lose their documents and they always need those documents, okay? Incidents. This is here, you'll see it in a few other sections. We don't use it. The only way we would use it, yes.
I'm sorry. So what documents specifically should we put in? Birth certificates, social security cards, anything else?
Photo ID for adults. And if they get social security as income, the award letter is helpful to put there.
And social security cards.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Incidents. We don't use this because unless there's something really significant. So an incident indicates that there's a very serious problem that might cause safety issues for staff at any agency. So not just that they weren't following your rules, okay? So because it indicates that maybe this person might be banned from future assistance at a shelter. So we only use this if there's a very serious safety issue for staff or for other clients. So if someone is truly a threat to themselves or others, and so this should only be added if that is the case and with supervisor permission, okay? Not just they didn't follow your rules, so you terminated them. That happens, and that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily preclude them. It's not a safety issue. They should still have access, if another agency chooses to do so, to be in another shelter. If they are a safety issue, that is still not saying the shelter might not take them, but it's important information to share. Okay, but other than that, we don't use incidents. Okay. So after you've done all that, that was all the client profile information. So I'm just gonna check in with you guys. How are we doing? That was the first step, basically. You're filling out the client profile information for each person, making sure they have their phone number in there, their updated contact information, that the basic information is accurate on the client profile screen, and that you have your file attachments as needed. You put in a note. That is the public note. Any questions so far? Okay, all of that was in Client Point, okay? We're gonna do Shelter Point, and then we're gonna take just literally a 5-minute break, okay? Just for, Marilyn, you're waving. Is that to get my attention or just?
I just saw Oliver.
Oh, okay. All right. So after we do the Shelter Point part, we're going to take a 5-minute break, get a glass of water, go to the bathroom, and then we'll come back. But that would be to come right back, okay? Because we don't want to do this all day. All right. So I'm going to start again sharing. So now you have done all of that stuff in Client Point, which is not the end of Client Point. It's just the end of Client Point in that moment. And now we are on to Shelter Point, okay? So after you created the client profile, you did all the household members' profiles, you go in the, actually the first thing you have to do is in that top right-hand corner, you had been in backdate mode, right? You had picked the day that you, and set the timestamp that you had established, and on to the right of that there's a red X, and you click on that red X to the right of the backdate mode to get out of backdate mode, and that deactivates it. So now you're in real time again, and then you go to the menu on the left, which is here. You see on the right here is the client information, and on the left is the menu bar, and you click on Shelter Point, and that's going to take you over to the Shelter Point dashboard, which looks like this. Okay, the Shelter Point dashboard is anytime you have anything like this with big buttons to click on, that's the Shelter Point dashboard. So we don't use hardly any of these buttons, okay? So it's almost like ignore everything, okay? The only thing you're paying attention to is you want to make sure this is the right project or program, and view all. That's pretty much all I use for Shelter Point, okay? So in Shelter Point, now remember, all you did already was you created the client's profile, or you updated the client's profile. You've done nothing to actually get them into the shelter. It goes very fast. There's a lot in the training. There's a lot of talking, but the actual process goes very quickly. The part that you've already done is quick and easy, okay? So you'll notice up here that in the Enter Data As, you're still in the Enter Data As with the correct family or with the correct shelter. That Enter Data As should appear as the provider name. So in this case, it was the Family Shelter at Catholic Charities. So you want to make sure that this information is correct here. And if you're in Enter Data As, it will be correct. And if you're not, you need to be, okay? And so you make sure this is correct. This is the right shelter. And then you click on View All, okay? Once you do that, you see your roster of all available beds in your shelter program, specifically that shelter that you're talking about. If you're at the family shelter, you already know at Catholic Charities that there's a separate shelter program for single women as compared to the family shelter, right? There's families, and then there's SW for single women. And then Ozanam has their own, and Fish, you have your own. So these are all the people in the shelter. And so what it's showing you in this roster is who's in beds now, in a room, in a bed, and what beds are available. So they're empty. Also, if the hold link is red, it says held, it means that bed is not available. So then you would just check with a supervisor as to why that might be. Okay. So this is your current unit list. Okay. There at the bottom, there are overflow beds. You don't use overflow beds when you have beds available in the shelter that are not held. So you just want to make sure that everything is set up properly before you put clients in the beds. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. All right. So again, you review the list of available beds and you choose which room or bed to put the family in. Okay. If it's a single guy or a single woman, it's just a list of beds. There's not rooms per se. Well, there are rooms, but they're not, you just put them in the bed. Okay, in the correct room. If, a couple things. If it's a family, you want to make sure there's enough beds currently showing in that room to put them in. And if there's not, you contact a supervisor first to add a bed into that room. So, Ozanam, you have a couple of rooms that are large, right? And then if there's not an, let's say room 10 here, in this image has 4 beds, but let's say there's also a baby and you're going to put a crib in there. So you need to add a 5th bed. Then Catherine or Christina will have to do that before you put the whole family into HMIS in the beds. Okay. Checking in, Catherine, real quick. Come off mute. Do you know how to do that? I think I told you once. Is she there?
Sorry, I'm dealing with a client. What did you say?
Do you know how to add a bed if there's not enough beds in the room? Do you know how to add the bed in Shelter Point?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, Catherine and Christina, I will show you how to do that later.
Oh,
I'll send you directions because
okay.
shelter staff, you cannot put people in that room if there's not enough beds. So you have to make sure there's enough beds in the room before you put them in. Otherwise, you're going to end up with people in overflow beds and it's going to be a pain to fix it. All right. So you want to make sure there's enough beds in the room first. Usually there is, but I will make sure Catherine and Christina know how to do that. All right. So when you're going to put someone in, so let's say we were just working on John Smith and his family. You're going to choose which room. You're going to make sure there's enough beds in that room for his family. And you're going to click the green plus sign next to bed 1 in that room in order to start putting that family into the beds. Okay. Again, make sure that you're putting the whole family into the one room and that there's enough beds in the room before you start. Okay. And you're not going to put like John in room 10 and then put his kids in room 11. That's not happening. All right. So you do want to make sure that they're all in the one room. And if you don't, then you're going to have to delete it all and start over, and that stinks. Okay. All right. After you click the green plus sign on that roster of available beds, you're going to be prompted again to do a client search, just like before. And you're going to type in the name of your client, at least some of the letters, and you're going to click search. All right. And we already created this client or updated this client, right, back on Client Point. So he's going to appear. After you've clicked search, you have your family, or at least the one person. Okay. So you're going to verify that this is the person. All right. You verify the last 4, the social, date of birth. That's the person you want to put in. You're going to choose the head of household first. If it's just a single adult, you're just choosing that single person. But if it's a family, you're going to choose the head of household. And you're going to click the green plus sign to the left of their name, and that's going to put them in that bed. All right. So once you selected the client, you're going to get this screen. And it's unit entry data, and it's the client's name, the date in, and now you need to change, because remember, we're not in backdate mode anymore. You're going to make it be the correct date, and you're going to set a 12 a.m. timestamp here. All right. See this button over here, midnight check-in? Never touch that. That is not what we do. Okay. So never ever touch that. It doesn't do it right. It sets it for 11:59 p.m. and that's not what we want. So you're going to put in the correct date and time. The time is always going to be 12:00 a.m. here. okay? This stuff here, you can use it or not, that's up to you, all right? But it's important just to, the most important thing here is to set the date and timestamp. You verify that there's no incidents, and we generally don't use that, right? We already covered that. Okay. Really quickly, you'll notice that I just skipped over this whole thing about a release of information. Our system has changed our privacy policy, and we no longer have the need to do the ROI. Your agency may have a different policy, but this continuum of care, which your agency is a part of, has modified the privacy information policy, and that will be updated forms will be sent out. But basically, clients, you can keep using it for now, but clients will be notified that they're in HMIS as opposed to having them sign a permission. So all of that will be explained in a separate meeting / training, okay? So for families with more than one person, the next thing that happens, okay, is here's the incident thing. After you put that first person in, you're going to scroll down and you're going to get to include household members in this check-in. Click the box beside each name. This is very, very important. In this moment, do not do this after the fact. You have to do it all at the same time. You check off all the family members and you assign, you click for each one, you click assign unit. Okay. And that is very important. Now, if this was just an individual without household members, you don't have to do this part and you skip to slide 26 apparently. But for households with children or couples without children, everyone gets checked off here, and you have to assign a unit at this point, so not at some later date. All right. All right. Any questions about this? This is very important that you're checking off all the household members and assigning a unit. When a household member joins the family at a later date, that's a separate slide, and I'll show you that at another time, or I'll send that to you, how to properly do it. There is a way to do it properly, and there's a way to do it very improperly. So I will make sure you have the information on how to do it correctly, okay? But this is for everybody that's coming in on that first day that the family enters. Okay. When you had clicked assign unit, you get a bed list. And when you do this drop down, it says like room 1, bed 2, room 1, bed 3, and so on. And it shows all the available beds at the shelter. What you want to make sure is that, at least for Catholic Charities, you are putting the children in the same room as the head of household, please. Okay. So, you know, every now and then you'll get a very large family and with multiple adults. And in that case, you might be splitting folks up, but just put them where they belong. Make sure you know what room you just put the head of household in so that you're putting the children in the same room, okay? So it's important that you're just matching that up. So that's what the assigned unit looks like, and then you do the drop down. Okay. After you've assigned the beds to all the different family members, you scroll down and you'll see entry data. So you just want to make sure that this box says HUD under type. You'll see this multiple services thing. You want to make sure that that is just the date that we already said, which was the date the client came in. Service start and end date, just make it be the same. And then do not do anything here in services, leave it blank, okay? Basically, all of this probably already looks like it should. You might have to change the date, and it doesn't really mean anything. Just make sure it's the day that the client came in. All right. So once you've done this is all correct. So it says the name of your program, it says HUD, and then it has the date that the client came in. Then you're going to click save and exit. Okay. Any questions there? Basically, you're not touching it really. Okay. Now, once you do save and exit, it brings you back out to the roster. And now you see, let's say we just added these two. You see that they are now in beds, okay? If you did it correctly, you will notice there's a column for group ID. And you will notice that your family members here have the same group ID number. If they do not, then something was done incorrectly, okay? It's important that this is correct and that all the family members in the same household have the same group ID. All right. That is how you know you did it correctly. All right. So if you don't have any numbers here, then what you just did somehow was you added them all as individuals, but that's going to screw up your report. They're not going to show up as a family or a household altogether. So that is important that you do. And if that happened, then you ask a supervisor to help you. Basically, you have to delete it and start over. Okay. The next thing you do is you choose the head of household and you click on their name. Okay. And it will bring you to the next screen. When you see the next screen, you're going to see tabs across the top. This is what you just did, okay? And now you're going to click on the entry exit tab. And if this, you're saying, wait, that's in Client Point. That is true. That is also in Client Point, but it is here in Shelter Point as well, okay? So you're going to do it from the Shelter Point window because you're already here, all right? So you're going to click on the entry exit tab. You'll notice when you click on the entry exit tab, you're going to get this pop-up window right here, which looks just like Client Point, okay? And you're going to click on you're going to notice there's an entry already because when you put them in the bed, it automatically created the entry on, and if you looked back over at Client Point, you would see it's there. So it automatically created the entry. So you will click on the pencil to the left of the entry date. All right, after you do that, you're going to get this list of household members. You want to make sure that all the household members are checked off, which they probably are, but just make sure. And if they're not, check them all off. And you want to make sure that the type is set to HUD, which it probably already is. And the timestamp should say 12 o'clock a.m. as opposed to what this image says. Okay, so you confirm all of that is accurate, and then you click Save and Continue at the bottom. All right. Again, it's really important. The most important thing of all of this is to make sure that all the family members are checked off. All right. So now you're going to scroll through each family member and answer the rest of the questions. Okay. You have to do all of the questions for each family member. All right. That's really important. When you get to the bottom of each one, you'll click Save until you've done the last one, and then you can click Save and Exit. A lot of these questions will already be answered because we answered them in the client profile screen. All right, so you don't have to redo stuff you already did. Okay. You'll notice again on the left that you have these, the people highlighted in blue. That's the profile you're looking at. And when you're done and you click Save, there will be a green check mark here, and you'll move on to the next one. You'll click on that second person's name, and that will be the profile you're looking at now.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
If you miss something in the entry screen when you're first doing it in Client Point, and now you see it in Shelter Point that it's not included, can you put it in there and it's okay in Client Point as well at the same time?
Yes. Well, first of all, you did not do the entry screen in Client Point. You only did the client profile screen. So if you did miss it on the client profile screen, meaning you didn't update it maybe, then you will be able to answer it now in Shelter Point in the entry screen. So that would be fine because the timestamp is still the same.
And that will update it as well in Client Point at the same time.
Yes. All the information goes back and forth. Yep. The most important thing there is that the timestamp is the same. Okay.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
For each client, you'll go through from top to bottom and make sure everything is accurate and answered. Okay. Remembering that it's not here in this picture, but just remember that all the required data elements are in bold and with an asterisk, and you work your way from top to bottom. Okay. And we are going to go over a few of these questions specifically to make sure you do them correctly. Okay. Again, we have the prior residence questions, and that is already populated, but because you did it in Client Point, but if not, you want to make sure it's accurate. Then you're going to have, and this is important, after the where did you stay before, like the prior residence question, you have length of stay in previous place, and that means how long were you in that place that you were just in. Okay, so if yesterday you were at your friend's house, and you've been staying at friends and family members, all different friends and family members for 3 months, then that's the answer. It doesn't matter that you were only at that person's house for a couple of days. It's like a category. You were staying with friends and family bouncing around for 3 months. And so that's the answer, is 3 months. So is how long were you staying in that type of place? Okay, so that's the answer to this one. All right, now everyone pay attention, hang on. This next section, I really need, and Catherine really needs your undivided attention, right, Catherine? Because this is the stuff that gets screwed up often, all right? So I see Caitlin nodding. So this is the stuff that we have to fix. And when Catherine and Christina and Nicole and I are running reports for Catholic Charities staff, this is the stuff that inevitably somehow is wrong. Use the, what? Okay, use the homeless history to help you with this too, okay? Now, for Catholic Charities in particular, I know you get a lot of this stuff, like they come in, they do like an intake, and then some number of days later, you do the full intake and you do the coordinated assessment, you get their homeless history and you go, oh, that doesn't match what they told me on day one. Then you're gonna have to work with supervisor you have to make the information match in the entry, okay? Backdate it to day one. And unfortunately, you do have to notify me. So your supervisor can notify me that we have to delete the incorrect information, because for these specific questions that I'm about to cover, HUD only allows the HMIS system administrator to delete the inaccurate information. So not only do you have to correct it in the entry, you need to make sure that my office is aware so that I can delete the incorrect information or it throws off the reports. Okay? All right. So everyone take lots of notes on that slide. All right. And also you will use the homeless history form to help you to talk to the client and have these conversations. Okay. All right. All right. So you can all see this screen again. This is the homeless history questions. Approximate date homelessness started. And by the way, next Friday's training, when we do the coordinated assessment, we're going to go over this again. And we're going to go over it very carefully with the homeless history form in front of us, okay? This is the approximate date homelessness started. This is the client's current episode of homelessness, meaning that if he's been on the street for a year, then this is a year ago, right? This date. If he was on the streets for a year and then for the last 2 weeks, he went to stay at his friend's house and now he's at the shelter, then date is the first day in the shelter because he had that window of time that he stayed at a friend's house. Okay, so it is the current episode of homelessness. Look down here in red. Homelessness here is only defined as time spent in a place not meant for habitation or in a shelter, which includes the domestic violence shelter or a hotel paid by an agency. It does not include any time that they were with friends and family in a hospital or a jail. Okay, so you're only counting the consecutive time that they were on the streets or in a shelter, or if it's street to shelter or shelter to street and back to shelter, that's all one episode. Okay, so it's concurrent time in those types of locations that defines homelessness. If there's a gap where they stayed with friends and family, or they were in a hospital or a jail, that's a new episode. Okay, if they go back into a homeless situation. Okay, so the approximate date homelessness started has to fit the homeless history. Okay. The number of times, I call this the number of times question because there's a lot of words here, but what it really means is in the last 3 years, how many separate times have they been in a homeless situation? Meaning on the streets, ES is emergency shelter, or SH is safe haven. So just pretend that's not there. This is HUD words. Okay. So in our community, how many separate times have they been on the streets or in a shelter? Again, using this definition. So in my other example, where we talked about they were on the street and then they went to a friend's house for a couple of weeks and now they're at the shelter, that is 2 times because there was that gap where they were at a friend's house. Okay. And then because HUD really likes to make us think and likes to torture our clients, right? So how many total months during the last 3 years were they on the streets or in a shelter? You're using the homeless history to help the client to tell their story. And then you add up the months. Don't ask them. You add up the months. Add them up based on what that is shown on that homeless history form. Okay? So when you're doing the homeless history form, put all the places they've been for the last 3 years. And I don't mean every single different friend's house, but I mean if there's a windows where they were at friends, then you put that down. They were with friends, different friends, from April till June of 2020. And then they were on the street. That's a new row on the homeless history form. Okay? So that's the answer that goes in here. So these answers have to match the homeless history form. And they have to match the answer above of the client's, where the client was staying before they got to you and for how long. So all of this has to come together to match. So I am going to pause this. All right, talk to me. Who has questions? Who's confused? This is the hardest part of the entire thing. Don't not talk now because I know you have questions. I'll take it. All right, our recording now. Okay, so we covered all of these answers. Homeless history has to match, right? And then if there's a mistake at intake, and then you learn of the corrected answer, then you have to backdate, you have to go back into the entry, fix it, and notify your supervisor to email me so I can delete the incorrect data in these answers. Cause of homelessness is the next question on that screen, and that is the root cause of homelessness. We try to avoid answers like eviction because that doesn't necessarily tell us anything. People get evicted for a reason, right? They get evicted for non-payment of rent, but they don't pay the rent because they lost their job or something like that. Or maybe they got kicked out of their housing because of their substance use. So it's not that they were asked to leave shared residence or evicted. They got kicked out because of their substance abuse or mental health or something like that. So you want to get to the root cause of homelessness. You don't want to just, go with necessarily the surface answer. Things happen in life for a reason. They don't just randomly happen, right? All right, one. Okay, thanks. All right. Moving down that slide, that screen in the entry is the dreaded HUD verifications. Okay, so each HUD verification section covers income, non-cash benefits, health insurance, and disabilities. There is a whole separate training and slides for how to, if there is already data listed in these sections, how to update those, okay? So please use that information. There's a posted training on our website for how to update the HUD verifications, not just at the time that you do an update in the interim, but also if there's already existing information. You want to make sure that everything listed is correct. So I am referring you to that training. You must review that training and those slides. So to make sure that you update this information correctly at entry, at every interim, and at exit, okay? It is also very important and affects what housing we refer them for through coordinated assessment to make sure the income is always accurate. So if they're changing income every month, because that happens sometimes when they jump from job to job, you need to make sure that's updated. When they tell you, oh, I got a job and I started 2 weeks ago and here's my first paycheck, you need to go in right away and update that, go into the interim and do the update on the income, okay? So please make sure that if nothing else, the income is always updated, all right? So you do, when a HUD verification, when the triangle is red, it means that there's something missing, okay? And if it's green, it means everything's answered, but then you want to make sure it's answered correctly. All right. If it's blank like this one, which maybe if you have a brand new client who's never been in HMIS before, it's going to be blank. You're going to click add, and then you're going to do all of the items in the bullet point list. A couple of other things in the HUD verification. When you do the disabilities, if they have a disability and you click on yes for one of those disabilities and you get a pop-up window, every question within the pop-up window has to be answered yes. So don't leave any of those blank, okay? And I did notice that that's happening sometimes. So pay attention to that. Every single pop-up window in the HUD verification for the disabilities has to be answered yes. All right, do you guys have any questions on that? Because you will get those pop-up windows for the disabilities. And the other thing about those pop-up windows is what I noticed, I think more so at the men's shelter, is that sometimes the first one is automatically populated yes in the pop-up window, and then you're answering the next question no. But that implies that their disability is not permanent. And if it's not permanent, you're not answering it as a yes, okay? The other thing is that when you answer these questions in the HUD verification, they have to match the overarching yes/no question. So it says income from any source, yes. That means something has to be checked off as yes with an amount within the HUD verification. And that's true for each HUD verification. If the answer to the yes/no question in the regular screen is yes, that HUD verification has to have something in there marked as yes. Okay, any questions on that? All right. You see my dog flashing in and out of the screen. All right, under all of the HUD verifications, you have the domestic violence questions, okay? If you answer yes to the first question, is the client a victim or survivor of domestic violence? Then you must answer the subsequent two questions, which are in italics and not bold. They're not bold because they're not required, but they are dependent on the yes/no question if the person is a victim, okay? So if you say yes, you have to answer both of these, okay? If you say no, then you leave them both blank, okay? Does that make sense? And it has to match, and it does throw errors in the reports if it doesn't match. So if you say yes and these are left blank, or if you say no and these are answered, it's going to throw an error in the report, okay? All right. Under the domestic violence questions, we have the coordinated entry data elements, and you see 3 windows that look like this. They might have some stuff in them already, or they might not, and these need to be answered, okay? Current living situation and coordinated entry event, specifically at the time of entry. Date of engagement, and everybody listen carefully to this. That is not for you. That is for street outreach programs. And I accidentally skipped to the next slide, but pay attention to that. It's tucked in there on that screen. If you did just join, just mute yourself, please. It is tucked in there on that screen. So do not answer date of engagement. None of you are street outreach program. Okay, that is not a field that you use. All right. So first of all of the coordinated entry data elements are only completed for the head of household. So you only have to do this once, and it is done for the head of household, okay? So the first thing you do is, the first one is current living situation, and you click add, and you get this pop-up window. So as opposed to prior information where I had you filling in the end date, we're not doing that now, so I've updated the slide here. You do a start date and an information date, which for your purposes is the day the client's coming into the shelter. Current living situation, because they're now with you, is emergency shelter. Living, you do have to answer this, okay? Guys, you have to answer these as opposed to not answering them. Living situation verified by, pick your shelter, the program that you are in. Is the client going to have to leave their current living situation within 14 days? If they don't break the rules, they don't have to leave within 14 days. Do we want them to move into permanent housing tomorrow? Yes, but they're not going to be forced to leave within 14 days. So the answer to this is no, okay? Questions or comments on this section here? Any feedback from Catherine and Christina that you are seeing at your shelters? No? Okay. So that is just the current living, that's the current living situation. The rest of this down below, you don't actually have to answer, okay? Because that would only be answered if you had said yes, that they had to leave your shelter within the next 14 days, okay? Now, the next one, you skip the coordinated entry assessment screen, section, because most times at the time of entry, the day the client comes in, you are not doing the coordinated assessment on that same day. Excuse me 1 second. Here we go. We're recording again. The coordinated entry event. So for the shelters, the event is the fact that they are coming into your shelter. So HUD defines that as HUD's idea of a referral to anything is like meaning there's an opening in the moment. So even though we have a waiting list for the shelters in our community, that's not the actual referral in HUD's world, because they are saying that a person is referred when there's an opening to be referred to. So that's why we have you guys doing the referral to emergency shelter in the coordinated entry event. So you're not filling out the end date. So you're doing an add coordinated entry event. The start date and the date of the event is the day that you're asking them to come. The event is the referral to emergency shelter, and that's in this drop-down list. Okay. So that's how you do this. Okay. After you select the event, you go all the way towards the bottom, and it says if the event was a referral to an ES, which is emergency shelter, TH, or some other stuff, you are the ES, you are the emergency shelter, then the location. So you're choosing, at that point, you're choosing your shelter right here. And if the client shows, then it's a successful referral. And the date is the date the client arrives. Okay, so you do all that, and then you click save. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I was getting onto this computer, so I missed the beginning. So how do we access this coordinated event? How do we access this part of the screen? We're not doing this upon entry. So we already
No.
did our data and entry level.
All right.
Data entry. This is a different
Teresa.
day.
No, this is the coordinated entry event. This is not the coordinated entry assessment. So this is done at entry. This is at the bottom of the entry screen.
Okay, done at entry. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about this? All right. Okay, so Teresa, what you missed was the coordinated entry, or the current living situation and the coordinated entry event. And those are at the bottom of the entry screen, okay? All right, so no end dates. So we're not using end dates on that stuff, right? Okay. So after you have done the entry assessment, all those questions for each family member, okay? And remember, the current living situation and coordinated entry event are only for the head of household, but all the other questions are for every single household member. Then you would, at the bottom, click save and exit, and it will drop you back out. You're still in shelter point. And so it will drop you back out and then return you to the shelter inventory list. Okay, so you double check, make sure everyone's there, and then you can click back over to client point in that menu that's off to the left. Now, a couple of things actually to touch base on when you're doing income. You're adding income only to the head of household or adult family members. Minor children do not have their own income. Okay, so if a child is receiving SSI because the child has a disability, you are listing the SSI under the head of household. But if a child is working a part-time job at the pizzeria and the child is under the age of 18, you're just ignoring it. Okay? If the child turns 18 and is receiving any kind of income, now the child has income. And so you have to do an interim, and that income gets assigned to the 18-year-old child now in the interim. And if it was previously listed under the parent, you would move it over to, take it out of the parents and move it over to the child, okay? If there are multiple adults in the household from the beginning, and they have their own sources of income, so they're both working, or one gets Social Security, the other one gets something else, you list it by person, okay? Does that make sense? Does everyone get that? Okay, but kids, no matter what it is, if they're under 18, it's under the parent's profile, okay? Same thing with non-cash benefits. Mom gets food stamps, WIC, whatever, it's all going under the mom. Unless somebody, like if there's a significant other and that person's getting their own benefits, then that would be odd to me, but that's fine. And then health insurance, that's different. Everybody gets their own health insurance. So the kids can have the Medicaid, that's fine. Usually they all have the Medicaid, and you're going to say yes for all of them. But for kids, you're going to say no for non-cash benefits and for income. And everybody has their own disabilities. So if the kid has a disability, you're marking it yes, and you're putting in the disability. Okay? Any questions on that? One other thing about disability. A disability, according to HUD, is a situation, a disability is a condition that is going to expect to impact the ability for them to live independently and is persistent and basically lifelong. So if the guy needs surgery on his knee, but he's expected to recover and be able to work after that, that is not a disability. Do not say yes. Do not put it in there. Do not put it in the HUD verification. Do not say yes to the yes/no question. No. He busted his knee, he needs it fixed, and then he's going to be fine. That is not a permanent disability. If you had the same situation, once you were recovered and were able to go back to work, you would not be saying, I have disability, I'm going to go out on Social Security disability for the rest of my life. So please don't do that. Also, if a person has a mental health condition, but is not, their ability to live independently is not impacted by that, then you should not be saying yes. There's a large portion of our society as a whole, homeless and not homeless, that have a variety of mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, bipolar, whatever it may be. They don't get SSI, they don't get SSD, they work jobs, it could be somebody in this room. That is not a disability. The disability is when it impacts their ability to live independently and be self-sufficient. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? So them having depression is not the be all and end all. It's whether or not it is going to impede their ability to be self-sufficient and live independently. So don't just check yes because they said, oh, I have depression. You're going to have to explore that a little further. I'm not asking you to be clinicians, though. Then you will explore it with them further. Talk to a supervisor if you don't know, but it's just not an automatic yes. Schizophrenia, yep, that's an automatic yes. Okay. If they get Social Security disability, which is SSD, or SSI, right, supplemental security income, that's an automatic yes, because the federal government has already decided that they are disabled because they're giving them those benefits. So that is the automatic yes. Or if they get any disability money from the VA because they're a veteran and they have a disability payment from the VA, that's a yes. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, and since I have you here, I will cover the difference between SSI and SSD. SSI is supplemental security income, and SSD is Social Security disability. And just to make life more confusing, there's also regular Social Security, which is for seniors. All of those get paid out of the Social Security Administration. The difference, the senior one, that's obvious, right? It's for 62 or 65 and older. Usually comes with Medicare as the health insurance. And it's just they had a work history, now they're retired and they're collecting, okay? That's like the one that is easy. SSD, Social Security disability, is disability for people who have a work history and are able to collect from Social Security because they have enough of a work history to collect something. SSI is a disability payment which is for people who don't have enough of a work history to have built up kind of that bank of money in their Social Security account. Okay, so kids can get SSI also if their parents are very low income as well, and they need they can qualify, or adults without the work history. Some people can get both if they had such a small work history or at such a low amount that maybe their Social Security disability would only entitle them to like $400 a month. Then they can get SSI to supplement that up to the maximum. And the maximum for SSI for 2021 is in New Jersey is $825 a month. Okay. So if they tell you they get Social Security disability and they tell you they get $1,200 a month, that's not right. All right, clients get confused. I think we've had one client, and I don't even understand it, in the last couple of years that had more than the maximum. I still don't get it, Catherine. But I don't understand why, but he really had SSI. There was even documents, and it was a mystery to me. So by and large, they either get SSD or they get both. If it's more than $825 a month. Okay. But it all comes from Social Security, and you have to, one of the first things you have to do is get that documentation from Social Security, because that will help to explain it. The SSI letter says supplemental security income on it. Unfortunately, regular Social Security for seniors and SSD say the same thing. They just say Social Security. So then you're left to try to figure that out. But at least you can distinguish between SSI and SSD. The other thing about SSI is it comes with Medicaid. Okay. Yes, question.
Okay, I have a client that's getting her father died. She's getting $910 a month.
That is another one. That's survivor's benefits. So survivor's benefits, also known as RSDI, don't remember what the acronym stands for. That comes also from Social Security. A person who, usually a widow or the mother of a child whose parents passed, will get the survivor's benefits from Social Security on behalf of the child. Sometimes a widow will also receive survivor's benefits because the widow happens to also be disabled. And then the last thing is an adult child who is disabled and whose parent passed might also receive survivor's benefits. But it is distinctly, it says in the letter, something about that it's for survivors, and that it's associated with the parent who passed with their Social Security number. Okay, so that's how you kind of try to sort that out. If a child is receiving survivor's benefits, it goes under the parents, the head of household's income, not under the child. And also survivor's benefits, there used to be a separate like HUD verification bullet point for it. There's not. You just list it under retirement from Social Security. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. That was one I missed.
And I'll add, she just turned 18, so you just told me I have to put it under her now.
If she's still receiving it, but Social Security usually, if the child is not disabled herself, cuts off the survivor's benefits when the child turns 18 or graduates high school. So you just have to kind of follow that. If she graduates high school in June, then she might lose the benefit as of July.
Okay, so my understanding is it's college. She's going to college. That's when she gets cut off.
That is not true at all.
Oh, okay.
Personal experience, not true. They will lose that benefit at the time that they graduate high school, unless the child is listed as also being disabled for some reason, and then it can be extended. But it is definitively not going through college.
Okay.
Okay, there's like a whole book about it if you go online to Social Security, that's one of their pamphlets. Okay.
So she'll get notice that says you're cut off?
Probably already got it.
No, she didn't. But anyway, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So when she turned 18, there was a letter to the parent shortly prior to that would have said like, okay, this is going into your child's name now. And then at a month or two before it gets terminated, there will be another letter. Okay.
Okay.
100%. That's how that works. All right. Any other questions about all of that income stuff that I just said? Okay. Also, with TANF, which is welfare for adults with minor children in their custody, is not the same thing as GA, which is general assistance, which is welfare for adults without children. Please pick the right one. If you are at the family shelter, it's TANF, if they have kids. If it's a single woman or a couple without children or a single man, then it could be GA. But it's probably not TANF if they don't have kids, and it's probably not GA if they do. That would be weird, all right? If someone gives birth, they'll switch from GA to TANF when they notify the Board of Social Services. Okay? I think that covered everything just about. All right, any questions about those HUD verification bullet points? Any other things that you think you sometimes get stuck on? Earned income. That would be any kind of earned income. I don't care how they got it. And if they earned it in any way, it's earned income. And also in the HUD verifications, that's a monthly amount. Okay, not an annual, not a weekly. Same thing with unemployment. Stop putting the weekly amount in there. Do a monthly. And if they have more than one job, just lump it all together under one earned income bullet point. Don't put in multiple earned incomes. Just put their entire monthly income in one bullet point. Okay? All right. All right. So now we're going back. We just finished everything in Shelter Point, and now we're going back to Client Point. Okay. So we came out of Shelter Point. We clicked on Client Point. You did enter data as, made sure you're in the right program. You made sure you did a timestamp that matches the date and time that the client entered, because we have like a couple more things to finish in Client Point. Okay. You need to, basically everything was done in the entry exit tab, right? There's tabs across the top. Everything was done because you just finished doing it over on the Shelter Point side. So you need to click on, across all of that, you have client information, and on the right, you have service transactions. So you need to click on service transactions. When you do that, you get to the service transaction dashboard, okay? You can add a need, you can add a service. I don't add multiple services. It doesn't work out well, so just don't. You can view entire service history, okay? Anytime that you add a service, like when you put in that you had a case management session with them, it automatically creates a need. But you do want to add needs that your agency does not do. So for example, you are a shelter, you're providing shelter, but this person needs substance abuse treatment. So you're going to add a need of substance abuse treatment because you don't do that. So whenever we have a need, whenever the client has a need that we don't cover, we're going to add that need, okay? And we're going to do that at entry, and then we're going to update it during their stay. Okay. So you're going to choose a need when you click on add need. You're going to choose a need from this drop-down list. It's pretty expansive, okay? Lots of different things in here. Anything they need, you're going to pick. You don't have to do much other than to pick it, okay? Unfortunately, you do have to do it one at a time. It doesn't let you do multiples. These are needs that your agency is not providing the direct service for. So substance abuse treatment, childcare, dental care, whatever it is, you don't do it because what you guys do basically is case management and shelter, right? So you're going to, maybe you put dental care, medical, rental assistance, whatever. These are things they need when they arrive, or you identify the need as time goes on. You are only doing this for the head of household or their partner, okay? You're not doing this for minor kids, all right? You also do a need status. So this would be identified, the need was identified, it could be in progress, or it's closed. If the need is closed, because you are following up and, you know, a month later, whatever that need was is now closed, and then the outcome of the need is fully met or partially met or not met. And if it wasn't met, you're going to put the reason. These are all drop downs, okay? But when you're first adding the need, you're just clicking to add the need, you choose it, the status is identified, and then you click save and exit. And you do have to do this one at a time, unfortunately. Then you go down and you select add need. This is the need we just added. Then you're just going to click add need and you do it again, and you just keep doing that till you got all the needs in. Again, you're not putting shelter, you're not putting case management, okay, because you already do that. All right. And then we already talked about the fact that as you go, you will see that, you know, a need is met. You can go in, you can view the need, you can click on the pencil to the left of it and update the status of it, okay? To add a service, you click on add service. So that day that you brought them in, someone met with them. So you're going to add a service. You did some case management time with them when they entered, they signed the papers, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll add that service, okay? In most cases, including for case management, you're only choosing, because it's going to show you all the household members, you're only going to choose the head of household, all right? You never choose everybody for case management. You make sure that the provider name here is accurate. So for you guys, it's one of the shelters. And the number of units of service. So remember that for I know you guys know this, but for case management, it's those are measured in 15-minute increments. So if you meet with the person for an hour, that's 4 units. Not 4, sir. It actually says number of units or something like that. That's an old image. And then the start and end date would be the day that you actually provided the case management service. Okay. Here it is, number of units. So, and then for Catholic Charities, this is where after you have done added the service, then you click save, and then you get the opportunity to put in your notes, and then the number of units. The unit type is 15 minutes for case management, and then for case management units, you're not doing a cost. Okay. In fact, I don't think anyone on here except for Catherine and Teresa who do shelter nights, you guys don't have to do the cost. All right. That's not relevant. All right. And Catherine and Teresa, you do separate for the bed nights. So that's a whole separate thing. All right. Any questions on this, guys?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So for the need, basically when we are working with here at the main shelter, there is employment, transportation, emergency food. So
Yeah,
we could
yeah.
provide that. So that means I can add that in need.
If you are also, here's what I would say. If you guys do some transportation, but you're not a ride service, right? That's not your primary
No.
thing. And you do give them some food, but they also go to Elijah's for food, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is that is still a need that you can put in there because it's not a service that you guys track. And in addition to giving them some of those types of assistance, you are also referring out for it to other agencies. So for example, they go to Elijah's every day, right? And you tell them to do that. So you might give them some food, but you are also almost always sending them down to get food at Elijah's. So I would absolutely put emergency food or soup kitchen as a need. For transportation, I would definitely add transportation because you might give them a ride somewhere, but you're not driving them to work every day. So you're also encouraging them to access public transportation or medical transportation. You give them rides when there's like no other way for them to do it, but you're also referring them out to existing resources in the community for those things. Right?
Okay.
So I would definitely add those as a need. And I would expect to see that need listed for at least at the men's shelter for almost everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay. So the last thing, and you guys have the slide, all it says is make sure you add yourself as their case manager in the case manager tab. And the coordinated assessment training, which you do not the first day that they come in, that training on how to do the coordinated assessment and all of that in HMIS is going to be next Friday. So, so that covers how to actually, I was just about to stop that, but I'm not. That covers how to do all of the entry in HMIS for Shelter Point. So I'm going to take, this is going to be quick, so we're almost done. We are going to cover the exit real quick. So when someone is leaving the shelter, to make sure you do this correctly, okay? Because it's not as simple, believe it or not, as just filling out the exit in Client Point in the Entry Exit tab, okay? So, but this is quick and then we'll be ending early. Yay, okay. In the meantime, for the entry, getting them into Shelter Point, getting them all the entry information done. Any questions, comments, things that are confusing? No? Okay. All right. So we're going to look at the exit. So this is how to exit them out of Shelter Point properly or how to exit them out of HMIS properly as a shelter. Okay. All right. Let's All right, so this is for shelters and transitional housing to get them out of those beds properly. All right, so the very first thing you do, the very first thing you do is enter data as and choose the correct program, right? Then you go into Shelter Point and you're looking at your dashboard. You make sure that it has the right provider, which if you did enter data as properly, you are in the right provider name. And you click View All to see your current shelter roster. So you see the people in the beds, and there is a red minus sign next to the person that you want to take out and his family. And then the empty beds still have green pluses because no one's in them, right? So what you do, I don't know why it keeps doing that. What you do is you click on the red button to the left of the head of household's name, okay? You do want the head of household. You make sure, then it goes to this screen. You make sure that the date of exit is the correct day that the client is leaving the shelter, and that the timestamp is a later time. So you want it to be 12 o'clock or later. I think Catholic Charities, you guys use like 5 o'clock or something, 5 p.m., all right? Below that, you skip this funding source thing. Ignore it, pretend it's not there. Below that, reason for leaving, 99.9% of the time, it should be completed program. For some folks who just disappear on you, then you can choose unknown/disappeared. And if they were terminated because they weren't following the rules, you can choose disagreement with rules or non-compliance or whatever those choices are. But if they leave of their own accord to go somewhere, it doesn't matter where, and they're not being terminated, and you know that they're leaving and where they went, then you say completed program, okay? The destination, remember that list of all those prior residence options? All of those are in the destination dropdown as well, okay? So you choose where they went. If the answer to reason for leaving was unknown/disappeared, your destination is no exit interview completed. What you are not choosing is other or data not collected. Pretend those are not there. You must choose no exit interview completed if you have no idea where they went, okay? You really want the destination to be reflective of where they really are, all right? Do not have it be, don't guess, but don't just, try to find out where they went, okay? One other thing is, and this is really important, if they're being terminated and or leaving voluntarily and they are going to stay with friends or family, you really want to try to figure out what their plan is after that, because if their plan is not to live with that person forever, then the destination would be staying with that friend or family member as a temporary solution, all right? Not, because remember, there's choices under staying with friends and family. It's staying with family permanent or staying with family temporary. So if they don't tell you, that's it, I'm going to live with them forever, it's all good, we made up, and, I'm there forever, and they're really just going there until they get a better offer or until they get some funds to pay for their own place, the answer should be temporary. And that absolutely affects the entire COC, the continuum of care, with our information that we report to HUD, okay? So, because what happens is if they were to become homeless again and come back to shelter, and we said that they went to stay with someone permanently, then that counts against us as a return to homelessness. But if they only went to that person's house temporarily, it does not count against us as a return to homelessness, okay? Now, I don't want you to make up an answer. I want it to be the correct, truthful answer. But if they aren't going to stay with those people permanently, then the answer is temporary. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that? All right. When you've done, and you want to make sure everyone is checked off, okay? Right down here under the destination or all the household members, and you check off everyone in the list. And then you click save and exit. And you really are not using this incident thing unless there's a safety issue, right? So you click save and exit once you've done this, all right? Then you go back to client point, all right, from the menu on the left. Make sure you do enter data as, you get the right shelter. You go back into that client, You make sure the timestamp matches when they exited, all right? So you set the timestamp and you're in the head of households profile. You go to the entry exit tab on the top and you click on you'll see that the exit date is already filled out because you just did it over in Shelter Point. But there's still 2 more things you have to do. So you click on the pencil next to the exit date. And you'll see that everybody's checked off because you did it right the first time. And you have the reason for leaving and the destination. All right. You leave this subsidy thing blank. It doesn't matter. And you click save and continue. All right. And you're going to get into this window, and all it is all the HUD verifications. And that is where you will be updating the HUD verifications for the last time for this client. Now, if you've been doing it all along properly and updating their income every time it changed, it probably won't need to be updated again. But you want to make sure that it's accurate and true for the day that they left, okay? Again, you're going to refer back to the separate training and slides for how to properly update the HUD verifications, which is on Coming Home's website, okay? Again, you do this update for all the family members. So when you do each one, and then you scroll down to the bottom and click save, and then you'll come back up and you'll do the next person and same thing. And after you do the last one, you click save and exit, all right? You do not put end dates on anything that is still true. So let's say it said the person gets unemployment of $1,000 a month, and now they're leaving your shelter, but they still get that unemployment. So you just leave it alone, okay? You don't put an end date if they are still receiving that item, okay? Now, the last things you need to do to complete the exit is you go put an end date on anything in the case plan, because maybe you created a case plan in HMIS in the case plan section. So you put an end date on any of the outstanding or pending goals and action steps, which your supervisor can show you how to do. And also any needs. Remember, we talked about all of those needs that were identified that we were referring them out for. You put an end date, not an end date, you put an outcome on those. So either it was met or it was not met and the reason why, okay? And then also you had assigned yourself as a case manager to that client. So you put an end date on the case manager assignment, and that way the client won't keep showing up on your roster for clients. Okay. So that covers how to properly exit them, as opposed to, you don't just do it in Client Point and do an exit. You have to do it start in Shelter Point, because otherwise you've exited them but left them in the beds in Shelter Point. So you want to make sure you start in Shelter Point and then go over to Client Point. And you also want to make sure that you got all the household members out. There's a lot of times that we see some kids floating around in beds that should have left with their parents. And I know that you didn't keep those kids. So that now covers the exit. So do you have any questions on the exit?
I do. What if you get supplemental information after they leave and that it changes? Like client tells you he's doing this, but now the client's doing that. Do you have to go back in and change it?
I would say that depends. Like, so let's say the client said, they told you that they're going to stay with their mom and that's it. That's a permanent situation. And then 2 weeks later, they call and say, yeah, I didn't really do that. Like, I didn't really have a place to go. I was just mad at you. And so I actually went to stay with my cousin, but I couldn't stay there and I got kicked out and whatever. So all you're really doing at that point is you're just changing it to, maybe you had put it as permanent, you're going to change it to temporary. But there's got to be a window on that. Like, you're not going to change it like a year later. You know, you're going to only give them a couple weeks to say something and then maybe change it. But you don't want to go too far out.
Okay, so a client that returns to homelessness, obviously, that needs to be noted.
So, like, if you have a client recently who said that they were going to be paying for their own hotel and then 2 days later called 211, you kind of have to assess that situation because they probably still had that same money they had when they left and can pay for their own hotel. And at the time that they left, they probably did go pay for their own hotel. So that's still the right answer. They are still paying for their own hotel, whether it's for 2 days or 2 weeks. So the answer there didn't change. Their story changed about the situation, but the answer didn't change. Make sense?
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.